So, welcome everyone to Jyotish, a Vedic Astrology Podcast. Today, we're joined by Kalidas Hansen, who is a Vedic astrologer living in Ananda spiritual community in Nevada City. Kalidas is a father, family man, yogi, Vedic astrologer, and skateboarder, musician. You've got many talents. It's great to have you here, man.
Thank you, Surya. Great to be with you, brother.
Yeah. It's just nice to start by learning a little bit about your journey with astrology. And I guess that's also tied into your journey with Ananda. So I'd love to hear a bit about how you came to astrology.
Yeah. Um, well, I came to Ananda at just about the point in someone's chart called the Saturn return. And it's about age 28 and a half to 29. And that was back in the year 2009 that I had arrived at Ananda. And I did not know astrology at all. In fact, I met my wife and married her, and we conceived a child, all without me knowing anything about astrology, which was all part of the plan. Because if you know too much about astrology, it can kind of make you hesitant, let's say, to enter into certain contracts in life. So God has to make sure you don't know astrology, so you enter into your karmic contracts, and then you can learn it. Once you're bound to the karmic wheel, you say, "What have I got myself into?" So it was when my son was born. We went to see who was to become my astrology teacher, Drupada. And he's a longtime Ananda astrologer, very respected, and has helped many people. And I had been a yogi for several years. I began practicing Kriya in the year 2006 and became a disciple of Yogananda in 2005. So it wasn't until about the year 2013 and 14 that I became interested in Jyotish, in astrology. And that was because of a reading that Drupada had done, first for me and my wife. It was a gift given to us, a couple's reading for our marriage. And then, even then, I didn't really know, what am I getting into? I didn't know it was going to become a major interest to me. And then when he read Japa, our son's chart, I realized during that reading how empowering it is to understand the deeper dimensions of one's karma, how it's going to unfold. And there's different ways astrology can be viewed. One would be how it binds us, how we're caught karmically, what caused us to have to reincarnate and work out our karma. So that would be looking at the bondage. And he did a brilliant job of looking at why Japa might have reincarnated and what his karmic bondages might look like. But also the much more important element of astrology is how we're going to get free, how God plans to free you in this life. So you can focus on either one, and both can be helpful. How am I caught? How am I bound? And then also, how does God plan to free me? And so when Drupada went through that little, well, it was he gives you a lot of time. He's very generous. It was a long reading and talked all about our son's karmic bondages and his plan for soul freedom. It just illuminated a bulb in my own mind. I need to learn this because I struggle with the same things that most humans do, frustration, feeling caught in delusional perspectives that are very small and ego-driven. And I longed for a more expansive perspective. Let's call it a more objective one, not so subjective to my own chart, my own vision, which is due to the way my planets were at birth. But let me investigate a broader perspective so I'm not so blind all the time. And it sure has been that. And it's been 12-ish years or something now. And um, yes, it has opened my eyes to where I've been blind. And that, I think, is one of the most important, useful aspects of learning about astrology and getting a reading, particularly, even if you don't plan to be an astrologer, to get a reading from an astrologer who can help you see your blind spots, and so that you don't act in ways that you regret and harm the people you love the most, which is often the result of life when we act blindly with attachment, and with frustration and anger. We harm the people. We end up harming the people we love and care about the most. Which, who does that cause the most pain? That causes us the most pain. So it's been a great blessing to learn. But what comes to my mind also as something that Drupada, my teacher, said is that the masters of yoga, Yogananda, Kriyananda, Christ, Buddha, whoever it is, these masters can see because they've transcended their own karma, their own chart. In other words, they've worked out their karma and they've attained a state of liberation from that blindness. They can see. And so he reminds me of that. He says, remember, even when the chart is giving you insight and you're getting insight and downloads and illuminated perspectives on things, that these masters can see a lot more than you can, and that the rest of us are flying blind. And that's a very important thing to keep in mind as an astrologer, that you still are subject to your karmic blindness. And so don't let it make you feel like you know a lot, because no matter how much you learn from your study of astrology and your study of life, as long as you're unable to enter the breathless state at will and go into the present moment so deeply that you feel all of creation as your one self, then you're still flying blind, and you rely to a great degree on the guidance and miraculous presence of God and Guru. So if I could say there's one thing that's helped my astrology really develop in a way that blessed my own life, it would be that my connection to yoga, to the path of Yogananda, and to the practice of Kriya Yoga, which always elevates the consciousness and emphasizes the aspect that Babaji says is most pleasing to God, the quality of humility. Drupada, my teacher, says that astrologers in India are said to be cursed. And the cursed, he talks about this almost every time we meet. What is that? Why are we cursed? And he just recently explained to me last week, he said, there's two reasons, and one is the obvious reason. You think you know a lot, and therefore you get into a lot of trouble thinking you know a lot when you still have a lot of karmic blindness. You still have a lot of karma to work out. So you'll think you know something that you don't really know. And thus you'll act in ways that harm the people you love the most. But then there's this other reason that he brought up, and it's that you try to, in some ways, be in control of your life, that you live in a way that limits your really living life because you're analyzing it too much. And so you look at a day when Saturn is with the moon, which is about 2.5 days every month. We have Saturn and the moon together. The moon crosses through Saturn's territory, wherever he is in the zodiac. And an astrologer will think, oh, these days are going to be bad days. I shouldn't do this or that day. And then when Jupiter is with the moon, we might think, oh, that's a good day to do this. And so we overanalyze life, and we think that we have control over it. And that thinking we have control, that's the main reason we have to keep reincarnating. Because God says, oh, well, if you want to be in charge of your life journey, you go for it. You try. As many times as you want, you can try. And astrologers get really in that control seat. Like, I'm going to control the planets rather than have them control me. And that's absolutely impossible to do. We're all going to be subject to hard times and loss of control of our emotions and humbling experiences that show us how little we know. And we're all going to be given people who challenge us, regardless of what we know about their charts and all of that. So anyway, back to this idea that we're in control. To learn that we're not in control, that's a yoga. That's yoga. You surrender. As it says in one of Yogananda's poems, teach me to purify my devotion through all surrendering love for thee. And that all surrendering means every thought that we're in control, that we can plan our destiny, all surrendering love. And that love implies trust that there's a bigger power, a mother, a cosmic mother that made our horoscope, that has a plan for us, and is totally willing to take charge of our lives, should we be willing to let go, all surrendering love, and allow God to be in charge of our lives. And that's what my teacher Drupada really emphasizes for an astrologer to be aware of as they practice. There's these traps of control that you can fall in, and pride, knowledge. And these are the ways that astrologers are cursed. And so to combine it with being a yogi is a great blessing, because you have this element of humility as your emphasis, of all surrendering love. And for that reason, I like to let go of astrology sometimes for days on end, forget about where the planets are, live my life as a yogi. And then when I have a particularly hard experience or day, I'll come to the charts. I'll come and look and study what's going on with the planets, because then it's already happening. It's not me trying to foresee or to control the future. It's me just kind of reflecting on, what was that influence? Interesting. Yeah, that was on my so-and-so house. So anyway, the idea for what I would like to share today is that one of the parts of astrology, of the chart, which is the housing system, and how it can become kind of like a map for somebody's life. And not so much a map to be able to see the whole map and see everything about one's life, but really the purpose of getting a reading is to find out like where you are now and where you're going next. And for this, knowledge of the housing system can be very beneficial. For instance, there's 12 houses in a chart, just as there's 12 signs in the zodiac that we understand. And you incarnate into one of these houses as your first house. And that's called the lagna, or the ascendant. And this house, becoming your first house, is like the root of your chart. And it has to do with the time of day that you were born. And this first house will have a planetary ruler. And whatever ruler, whatever planet rules the sign of that first house, let's say if it's Leo, it's going to be the sun. If it's Cancer, it's going to be the moon. If it's Gemini, it's going to be Mercury. These are things that astrologers have memorized and know what are the rulers of each sign. But whichever one becomes your first house, that's going to tell us something very important about your character development. It's called the house of personal Dharma. And there are 3 Dharmas in everyone's chart. This would be the 1st house, the 5th house, and the 9th house. And these 3 Dharmas comprise the duties that we're going to be sort of given or attract in our life to develop ourselves spiritually and to become freed from old bondages. What is Dharma? Swami Kriyananda defined it as that which needs doing, and you're next in line. So first of all, first Dharma is our character development, and that's called personal Dharma. Become somebody who you enjoy being. In other words, enjoy your life. Enjoy your person that you wake up to every day. And if that is neglected and you live, let's say, for other people's perspectives, which would be the opposite of the 1st house, that would be the 7th house of relationship and other people's reflective presences in your life, then you won't really get to know how to develop yourself if you're always caught on what other people think about me being your validation. So what does the 1st house have to do with? It's your relationship with yourself. And wherever that planetary ruler, the ruler of your 1st house, the ascendant, is, it's going to tell us very important information about how and what area of life will be your major focus on how to develop that character. So if it is a person, let's say a Gemini ascendant, we will look for their Mercury. If their Mercury is in the 9th house, in Aquarius, that will be in the house of spiritual Dharma. And that will be a person who is geared towards religious practices or finding God, or as they call it, the house of grace and good fortune. And that person will be very driven towards spiritual effort. But there's 12 of the houses. And what if the ascendant Lord is right on the ascendant in the 1st house? That means that they're very important to themselves and that they're going to be a leader. They're going to want to excel in life. And there could be the danger of pride there, but there could also be a really great leader waiting who understands that God is the self. There is no other. It's just an illusion. That would be a very high octave of the 1st house, is somebody who recognized that God must work through us if we are to achieve greatness, because he is all the power in the universe. And when I'm connected to him, I feel an increasing flow of guidance and peace. And when I think it's all up to me, I feel stressed out and uneasy and worried about my own persona and how other people think about it. So anyway, the 1st house becomes probably the most important house in the chart because it has to do with you. And you'll see everything else in the chart has to do with the things that you do. But this particular house, the 1st, it's called the Lagna. It is the house of personal Dharma. And it's how you develop yourself and become somebody who you like, who you love. There's a lot of talk in our world about loving yourself. And they think about, what comes to mind superficially is like taking a jacuzzi with a bowl of ice cream. It's like how to pamper yourself. But the love of self, how to love yourself is to be useful to humanity, to become a presence in this world that blesses others, and therefore sees your own existence as useful. And that's really, I think, the highest way that we can love ourselves and develop our personal Dharma is by becoming a very useful presence in this world, serviceful, kind, friendly, compassionate. And these are the qualities that in the Bhagavad Gita, it says these are the qualities that lead to freedom from the ego. So there's two selves, as we know on the spiritual path. There's the little self and the big self. And it's by living for this bigger self that the personal Dharma really finds its climax. And that it would falter, essentially, if you just lived for the little self. You'd eventually get caught in what we call Maya or duality. You're obligated, in other words, to experience ups and downs as long as you're part of this creation and invested in your own separate self. But when you live for the bigger self, you get to transcend all that and live in God's love and freedom, which is what leads to your character blossoming in just the way that you always wished it would. I want to be someone that I like to be. And that can only really happen when you have attained unity with your source, who can then sort of be the guide every day, the presence that helps water the plant of your unfolding character. So moving on to the way that the chart is structured is we have first a Dharma house, which is the first house. And then the second house will be Artha. And this is the pursuit of wealth and security. As I like to think, this security isn't just money, it's many things. Wherever somebody's second lord is, that will tell us something about where they believe security will be found. Many people on the spiritual path, you will find their second lord, the lord of the ruling planet of their second house. You'll find it in the spiritual Dharma house. It's like somebody who's already recognized in another lifetime that seeking God is their security. They've already had it for a while, and they're coming into this life with that memory very strong. They don't want to miss that message. And therefore, they will have questions about what this world is doing. Why is everyone thinking that college is going to bring me security? Why is everyone trying to get me to focus on money and bank accounts and retirement funds when I'm like 25, when I feel a deeper longing for something more eternal, an eternal security as opposed to a temporary one? But this second house is called an Artha house, and it does include our pursuit of the things that we're going to need while incarnate in a frail, physical, mortal form. So it does kind of open up when the adults surround the child and say, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because we, the adults, have all found security, we think we have, and you need to follow us because we think we know how to find security. And yet each of them is dying and sick and leaving this world just as quick as the next. And they're just as confused as the last when they do meet with illness and suffering, because they never really did find security. And so life is a very humiliating and difficult experience if you live only for material security. Let's say it's someone with the second lord in the seventh house. The seventh house is about relationships. It's about marriage. It's about the reflective quality of other human beings. So that person will find security in relationship. And so it's wherever this second lord is, it's going to tell us something about where is security for you. If the second lord is in the sixth house, this will be someone who finds their security in being healthy, and someone who finds their is that your chart?
Yeah, I have second lord in the sixth house, Jupiter.
and then also through their service, they'll find their security through, I need to find something to do that sort of makes me feel useful in this world. So, yeah, those are very hard workers. Those are people who will be driven. And knowing your chart personally, Surya, you also have strong 10th house planets, which is another layer to that. Let's say it's another Artha house, and it has to do with your service to humanity. So there's a couple of things in your personal chart that indicate that you will be driven to serve in this life, and that in some way whatever wealth you accumulate, that will just be like a result of having worked hard, but it's not the security. It's not where the security is being found. It's being found in you being a healing influence in this world. It's like basically you really want to make something of yourself. And didn't mean to put you on the spot there.
No, it's okay.
But yeah, the second house is always a way you can find out, how does this person view security? If it's a second lord in the second house, then that will be somebody who really does need to deal with money, probably, and also security is very important to them. So the delusion that's imposed on us by our societies is money will bring you that. So if they remain on that level, it may be that they become very rich. But will that bring them security? It may be that in this life they really discover that doesn't. And then they go on a deeper search from there. And the purpose of that incarnation would be to achieve wealth so that they could see through it. Just like they say most wealthy, famous people are unhappy. That they didn't achieve the security that they wished for. So a strong second house will be somebody who does attract money, but then can eventually see through it and move on to a new quest for security, which would be, let's say, helping other people with their money, using their money to help other people who are less fortunate in this world. That could be a very good example of someone who graduated from the second house karma.
And if the second lord is, what came to mind for me is if the second lord was in the eighth house, which is opposite, what do you think would be the results of that? Because that seems like it would be a kind of challenging position because it's your security is coming from a place of insecurity, a place of difficulty, a place of challenge.
Absolutely. Yeah. And we deal a lot with opposites in the chart. So what would be the opposite of the house of wealth? It would be the house of poverty. The eighth house is often people who struggle with karmic debt. And so therefore that person where do they find their security? Well, it's not going to be in poverty. That won't be the way to diagnose it, but they will find their security through ecstasy, through seeking the transcendental freedom of being somebody like Saint Francis, who is impoverished but in ecstasy. It's actually quite a challenging position you bring up, I think, and it would lead someone to first where would they find their security? In states of freedom, in states of feeling freed from the contractive struggle of materiality. So the eighth house people are often ravers, shamans, seekers of the ecstatic, not quite on the yogic path per se. Let's just say that comes next. But they're thirsty for security in the form of something unlimited. And so that leads them to the view that ecstasy and the ecstatic experience is where I find my security. is very popular now to do things like go to ayahuasca ceremonies or peyote teepee ceremonies. And these are like eighth house type. It's the seeking of the ecstatic. Does it lead to material wealth? Rarely, unless you're like one of the facilitators of an ayahuasca group, and those people get really rich because they charge like $500 for one experience. But yeah, interesting question. When you have it opposite, because the eighth house is opposite the second house, you're almost going to be dealing with the opposite quality as a learning platform. So that person would also probably struggle to get grounded in their material resources and always be feeling like they didn't have enough material resources to meet with their karmic reality. And so, yes, that would be a challenging position. So that's the first Artha house. So far we've gone through the first Dharma and the first Artha. And then we go into the third house, which is Kama. And this is the Sanskrit word for desire. Now, the third house is what my teacher defines as the sensory mind. There will be three houses of mind coming up. The third house is sensory mind. The fourth house is emotional mind. And the fifth house is the discriminative or intuitive mind. But first, let's talk about this sensory mind, the Kama house. This is the real free birds. Like, I want to do what I want to do when I want to do it. I want to make my own hours. I don't want any boss in my life. I want to be my boss. These are the people who really need to be in charge. And when you see planets in someone's third house and they're strong planets, then that person's not going to want anybody to tell them what to do. Now, interestingly, the opposite of the third house is the ninth house of spiritual Dharma. And if we're all sucked in on the third house, we won't have any interest in God until we've failed miserably in life. And the third house people can either become very, very self-confident, don't tell me what to do types, but they can also become really great if they learn to bounce their will, which is the house of free will, is the third house. If they learn to let go of what they think is right and invite God into the picture, that's kind of bringing the ninth house, the opposite, into the third house. And that can become a very powerful person, because it might look to the world like they're choosing freely with their own will, but inwardly they're consulting with God, saying, how should I use my free will? And that will be a very brave and empowered person. They won't want other people's perspective to tell them what to do. That will still be there, but they'll be reliant on God's will to direct their will. And that will result in a very powerful will. So why is it the sensory mind? This is the first place where, like, the baby, after they've developed, like, mom is my security, I'm a young child, and I'm growing. Now, what do I like to do? I like to play with toys. I like to eat yummy food. You just decide, what do I like when you're in the third house? And and that can also lead you to a lot of trouble as an adult. I only want to do what I want to do. And so you become a slave to your senses, and you fail to recognize there's deeper levels of enjoyment in life that involve the necessity that God lead you, and that you take the back seat of your authority and allow God to be your authority. That's a very healthy third house, as somebody who includes that opposite of the ninth house. But usually these people are very strong-headed. I personally have the planet Ketu in my third house. And I have had many jobs in my life. I've had several altercations with bosses in my day. And I do have a personal business, which is another aspect of third house people, is they often form their own businesses and make their own hours. Right now, I'm in a cycle of greater service, and I am working under a couple of different bosses at Ananda, and it's been great to let go of my need to feel like I make my own hours and just show up and be serviceful. Because to be honest, the K2 in my third house, it shows an old direction, an old habit that I want to be in charge. And K2 is never where you want to stay in the chart. That will produce depression because it's doing what you already did in another lifetime. So coming back to it, the third house has to do a lot with what do you like to do? It's your first, most basic desires. But as you refine those, after you've made some mistakes with those desires and created pain and suffering for yourself, you will want God's perspective on what should I go after? Here's a really good question. How should I use my free time today? Because third house tends to be a little challenged with that. It's like, okay, I got some free time. I'm going to get into the senses. And they eat, they overeat, they oversleep, they do all these things that feed the senses, and they bind themselves once again to the sensory mind. And life doesn't really cater to that. In case we haven't noticed, it's not just constantly pleasing our senses. It's bringing a lot of difficult, painful experiences of that clash with the sensory desire. For instance, having to work for 8 hours and your back hurts and you'd rather just lay down. It's like your sensory mind is you're either going to rise out of that or you're going to suffer. So in other words, just following your desires isn't the path to happiness. But when you do go into that place spiritually and you say, Lord, guide my life, help me to embrace all that you send me, and also help me to use my free time wisely, then we can get a lot of grace and our willpower can really grow. So Yogananda said something very insightful about willpower. And he said, will rules supreme in every realm. So the development of our will here in things like overcoming sensual weakness or overcoming the physical body's wish to sleep in and waking up early and meditating, these things strengthen the will. They give you mastery over the senses. And you have become a strong-willed and therefore freer individual. And then when you go into the astral world, apparently Yogananda says will rules supreme in every realm. It will be your willpower that you've developed in this life, that you will be able to swim through the astral currents to higher realm. And what if we have a deep will to follow God's will? This is when the will becomes the strongest. Not my will, but thy will. And that will be tested many times on the devotee's path. Can we surrender what we would rather see happening and embrace what is and give our best energy to it and trust that it is our spiritual life and path? And that has an immensely strengthening effect on the will, as does the practice of regular meditation, where we say, it doesn't matter how I'm feeling, how my will wants things to be. I'm going to meditate and transcend that little will and focus on what is God's will for my life. And again, that third house being will be very blessed with a strengthening of will.
The yogic path is really about overcoming that isn't it? So it's about balancing the third house and the ninth house, because the yogic path is about overcoming our likes and our dislikes. And, yoga's chitta vritti nirod, it's neutralizing those waves of likes and dislikes. And so, as you say, it's about harmonizing our own will. Because if we go too far into the third house and only assert our own will, then we get into trouble. And if we only go to the ninth house and we just surrender completely and don't take any action and don't do anything, just lay there and expect God to do everything, then we don't, we need to balance both of those, don't we?
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's a very key axis, the third and ninth house. That's a key axis for the devotee to understand. You're absolutely right. And not to give up, because the ego's going to constantly every day want to grab that will again and control. And so, you mentioned skateboarding. That's something I've learned. I've done for 30 years as a discipline and also an indulgence. It's a very fun thing, but also extremely hard. And it hurts you, and you fall down again and again and again. And it teaches you to get back up if you want to succeed. So another element of that third house is somebody who isn't going to quit. And that's what we need to, as it's said by many great yogis, the whole secret of the spiritual life is perseverance. As often as that ego tricks you into smallness of perspective, you don't give up in trying to offer it. You always try again at meditation, regardless of how restless it was. You come back and you try to seek, you try to offer yourself. And that willingness to persevere is a great gift given to the devotee of God. And the tendency to give up in life, if you look around in this world, mostly you see people who have given up. In other words, they've suffered and they've become disillusioned with the joy that's possible in life, and they've given up to negativity. We're going to now enter the fourth house, the emotional mind. And that is where you can either have a very negative mind, a jaded mind about life, or you can live in an inner heaven in the emotional mind, meaning you can have a positive mind. The fourth house is the first moksha house. And so what makes it a moksha house? Well, the fourth house will initially show your bondage of mind, and it will be bound to the energies of what you experienced with the mother, with the home, and with the family. And these three things, they bring up a lot for people emotionally: the mother, their home environment, and the family that they grew up with or that they live with now. It can bring some of our greatest tests, our deepest angers, and also our greatest joys and enjoyments. Mother, home, and family, in a good light, that's a beautiful, comforting thing. But for some people, those three words are very dark. My mother and my home were troubled, except for some people. And therefore, I look at my family as a burden to me. So you see, you can go both ways with this emotional mind. And it does have to do with how we're relating to these three energies of the mother, the home, and the family. But let's start with home, because the home externally is, of course, this is like the first thing that the husband and wife dream of having together as their idea of moksha, which means freedom. Honey, we're going to have a beautiful home where we can do what? Where we can lock the door to the madness of this unpredictable world and its troubles, so we can enjoy each other. And pretty soon they create a child and they have the stresses of finances and parenthood, and the home becomes a hell. because they thought it was moksha. Now they're locking themselves in, hoping to hide from the world. Anyway, the point is, it doesn't really work to think that having a home, a nice home someday, will be the solution to all my problems. And there's many people who dream of this, and are working towards it and work their whole lives towards trying to get a better home. And it's not actually the answer, because there's a moksha element to this fourth house, meaning there's something to free you in this experience. And it's the inner home. It's your mind. It's your mind. How is your mind? Is it under your control? Because if it's not, which is the majority of most people, including you and I, we are not in control fully of our minds. We're trying every day to gain a sense of not control over the thoughts, but the weeding out of negativity, the negative habit of mind, and the self-offering mind that says, I'm here for a bigger purpose than just me and my likes and dislikes. And so then the emotional mind can become very happy. Just as many people, when they're at work, they're feeling good because they're being serviceful and they're thinking good thoughts of service and doing good jobs at their workplaces. But so this is the inner home. And there are yogis in India who won't stay in the same place for more than 4 to 5 days because they don't want to fall into the delusion that anything external is their home, that their home is primarily within, and their home is a happy place when they make it a spotless, present-minded being. And that requires practice. So the fourth house is kind of where we discover that practices like meditation are important. Otherwise, our mind will become a bondage to us and won't allow us to be happy. Even when we're in, like, let's say, a beautiful beach setting on the top of a sand dune looking over a wonderful looking sunset on the beach, we might still be in the mind thinking negatively about our husband or wife or about the stresses of the week to come. And that will prevent us from enjoying the moment. So it's a bondage in the emotional mind that we usually see. But we can free ourselves through a very simple practice, and that is positive thinking. Jupiter. This is what Jupiter is known for. If someone's born with Jupiter in their fourth house, that's someone who will have done a lot of work to weed out negative thinking. They might still have judgments, they might still have bondages that get them caught in worry, but for the most part, that's very good karma in the mind. Someone with Saturn in their fourth house, or Saturn as the fourth lord, which you and I both have in common, is somebody who will need in that life, for their own freedom's sake, to weed out negative thinking, both about self and about other people who we're connected to. Because who will suffer? Well, of course, we will suffer from the negative thinking, but thoughts are very real forces. The people who we think negatively about, they will not like us. If we think badly about them, they will feel on some level that we're not holding charitable, kind, and compassionate energy towards them. And that will cause problems in our life of home and family. So the weeding out of negative thinking, the being will, and this is where an astrologer can really get trapped. If they think they're wise and then they have a negative thought, they're going to think that negative thought's right. And that's not right. If it's a negative thought, it's not right. And so you can get caught in believing your own negative jargon inside the mind when you think you're wise. You're like, oh, I'm right about all these negative thoughts. And then you feel terrible. Your inner home has been polluted with a belief system of negativity. So again, coming back to the idea that this is a moksha house, we need to clean that inner home to clear out the cobwebs of negativity and let the sunlight in and make it a nice clean home in there that thinks positively and compassionately about the people who are our family, because they're the ones, as Ram Dass said, if you think you're enlightened, go visit your family. So, because they're the ones we carry this karmic bondage with the most, and tend to focus sometimes on what's wrong with them rather than emphasize how great they are, which sometimes we can do with people we don't know very well. Oh, I just met this really great person. We don't know them yet. They're not our like family yet. So we tend to be nicer to people who we don't really know all their cobwebs, all of their challenges and their irritating characteristics. So and getting that mind very clean is the way to free the mind from the emotional bondage. And then family. This is, you can get really us for and no more. You can get attached to your children and to your wife as the people who matter the most. But the moksha element of family is learning to see every human in this world as your family. And so the love that you're working on with your family, which is fourth house work, this is the family, this is purifying your love. You're learning to love unconditionally the people in your family, regardless of the flaws and terrible things that they do or say. You're learning to let go of the negativity and love them unconditionally. And this will give you a great power. It will give you the power to love everyone that way. We're just practicing with our families. But then when we purify that love, we'll feel it. It will be naturally present for every human we see. And this is because it's our natural state that we're unfolding through our practice with family in close quarters, where we have to deal with their character flaws that we perceive and love them anyway. In other words, if you can love those people unconditionally who God places in your life every day, then you'll be able to love anyone. And that's kind of how we practice, is with these people who we've magnetized as close karmic, what sometimes feel like burdens. But as we practice that love, it frees us from our little complaints about humanity's flaws. And then we may see someone later on in life that we don't know very well, and they're being a very like negative, irritating person. We might think, oh, well, I've already learned to love that. I've already learned to let go of complaining about that person's negativity through my family unit. So it has a very liberating effect to live with people. And even monks know this. That's why they live together. That's why nuns live together. They know that if they just are by themselves, they won't have these mirrors to show them where their negativity lies in their judgments and things. So again, family doesn't have to be husband, wife, children. It can be a group of monks who are a family. And they will all test each other and teach each other how to love unconditionally. And then lastly would be the mother, which is that we all have this relationship of sensitivity with the mother, whether it's negative or positive. And we need to expand that in this house to see that there's always been a mother. She's everywhere. And this is our relationship with God. And so just to make it very simple, that we're feeling a trust that we are going to be taken care of throughout this life by a force that's bigger than our earthly mother, regardless of how well she did for us or how much she may have faltered in our eyes. But to regain the trust in life that there's a powerful presence that cares about us, that we can appeal to for help, that we can bring our problems to and say, I really screwed up, I need your guidance. Or we can bring our poverty to and say, I really need you to support me. I'm so low on money. Please guide me to where I can attract more of what I need. And so this divine mother becomes the moksha of this house, of us learning to relate to God as mother, as the all-provident, all-providing one, which the Hindus, the Indians, they think of as Lakshmi. And a very, very popular deity in India is Lakshmi, because she's that infinite source of wealth, who, when you worship with trust, faith, and surrender, you will see she fulfills your every need. But if you think, oh, it's up to me, I have to create a scheme, I have to make money off people, I need to look out for my own needs, she will let you. She will allow you to try to do it yourself and be in control, which is why there's so many poor people in the world. They have not appealed to Lakshmi. They have thought it up to themselves to scheme a way through life. And those are people who have, this can become very layered, and we have to work our way out of it to a place of trust in the power of generosity once again. That God is a generous God, and we too will attract great wealth in our life if we behave in a generous way. And that attracts the grace of that deity we call Lakshmi, the infinite giver. So
yeah, it's like
that's
there's
the first four.
the idea that I'm getting in the fourth house is like there's a personal aspect to it, which is the family, which is the earthly mother, but then there's also this impersonal aspect to it, which is the expansive love that goes beyond your family, and then the divine mother, which is the outward manifestation of the mother in our life, so that's a really interesting aspect which I hadn't really thought about. But also I was interested about the placement of the fourth lord, because we talked about the first house ruler being how to become someone you enjoy, become someone you love. The second house ruler is where our security comes from. And the third house, what do I like? What do I like to do? So what does the fourth house kind of indicate? Is that like where I feel at home? Is it where I feel a sense of peace? Or what do you make of that?
Yeah, I think that those are good perspectives, that those are both very valid. And then you'd go to the idea also of moksha. How will I be liberated from these four smaller ideas of mother, home, and family? And that fourth lord will be somewhere where it will expand you in those ideas. So let's say if it's the fourth lord in the 10th house, which would be opposite the fourth house, it'd be like, I'm going to, through my service, through my career, I'm going to feel, I'm going to work towards liberation. I'm going to work towards liberation from these small ideas of I need to be at home. Well, you're in your 10th house, you're going to be out. You're going to be in your career, or you'll be busy a lot. So having a sense of home within you as you're a career man, like Rajarsi Janakananda, who would be a good example. He was a driven career man and became a multimillionaire. But he would meditate at his office, and he would always meditate before he made important decisions. He would go home inside. He wasn't allowed to really go home because he was so busy. So whatever the fourth lord is drawn to, that will bring us greater perspective on how to liberate ourselves from these fourth house bondages to the emotional mind. If you want to make it really simple, and just this will go across anyone's chart, wherever it is that the fourth lord is, that's somewhere you need to learn to think positively and hold positive energy. So if it's in the workplace, then you need to see the work people as family and think of them as friends and brothers and sisters. If it's in the ninth house, this will be spiritual dharma. It will be you tending to think that your family are the people who follow the spiritual life. But that might be a very slendering perspective. In other words, I only love devotees. That would be a hang-up for someone with the fourth lord in the ninth house, is that I only see as family those who seek God. And, even Jesus said, who is my brother and who is my father, but my mother, but they who seek God. But he wasn't saying that, I don't think, in an exclusive way, that he doesn't love all people. So sometimes when your sense of family is brought into only these type of people who love God, God will put you in a position that doesn't allow spiritual family. It puts you in a much more worldly environment, because your work will then be to learn to love these people who don't follow the spiritual life. Think positively about this very worldly man who's totally sensual. See his higher nature. So that could be a real liberating thing to do that. And a good example is I used to have to work in an Italian restaurant that I served meat lasagna and veal and all these meat products. And I would think, God, why did you put me in this work? Why am I stuck in this job where I have to serve people such poison? And in my eventually, through my meditation, through my prayers and asking, the answer came, you're judging these people. That's why you're with them. You do not see them as family. You see them as meat-eating, disgusting, toxic people. And so that really changed my way I approached being a yogi waiter. Was like, oh, all right, you're going to have the carbonara, or they'd ask me, what's good here? And there's like all meat products. And I would share with them, I'm a vegetarian, but people really like this. But just learning to have love for all people, and that would heal wherever that fourth lord had traveled and was creating emotional bondage in your mind. So in other words, I'd go home very sad from that restaurant some nights. Like, how am I ever going to find something useful to do in the world? I'm just poisoning people. And then God basically pointed out, well, you're judging them. And when you're done judging them, and when you can learn to love them, you will be able to graduate from this position in this world. And sure enough, it did happen quickly. Once I learned to love that job by loving and praying for people there and serving them whatever they ordered with no judgment, I was released from that service. So anyway, that's a moksha. That's a mini moksha that I got freed from. And so you'll see that when you learn how to think positively in whatever area that you've been placed, especially if you don't like the current area where you are, you'll be able to graduate from it much quicker and move beyond it. It's because of the negative thinking there that you're bound to it. It's creating judgment and different things that slow down and create more karma there.
Awesome.
So going to the fifth house, we have the next Dharma house, and this is your creative Dharma, which you just mentioned. You have children. I have children. And this is a big part of our creative Dharma. And it's the most commonly created thing amongst human beings, is this child rearing thing. It becomes a massive creative project that requires a lot of counseling. Remember, I mentioned the fifth house is the discriminative mind. And when we have children, and of course, this applies to people without children too, but when you have children depending on you for your guidance, you really have to become a good counselor. And you're not a good counselor yet. When you have a new child, you have to learn that spirit in its creative aspect can flow through you to accomplish your Dharma. Whatever it is that's requiring your creative insight or your counseling insight, which are pretty much similar, how can I become intuitive in this moment to say the best thing, to do the right thing, and to create something beautiful, to help create to help this child create themselves, basically. So the creative Dharma are also the artists, the musicians, the really the people who love to use their higher mind, the intuitive mind. And if we get caught in the illusion that we're the artist, that we're the musician, or that we're the father, then we will be stuck with our own ideas. And God will allow us to work as long as we want. As long as we think we're in control, He'll let us be in control. But we will create great errors there. We'll become upset as a father. We'll do things to our children that scar them emotionally. Like it's been true in my case. The first 5 years of my son's life, I faltered at trying to be a father. I didn't realize so much that I needed so much help from God to be present with my child. Present to do what? To accept them just as they are. Because when you completely accept the reality as it is, then you can move with confidence into a next step with intuition. If there is any kind of rejection or wish to control the person or the reality or the creative project, then you're taking the reins away from spirit and you're saying, I'm in charge here. And you'll be allowed to do that, but you won't have the intuitive, discriminative mind that you wish you did during that creative project, whether it's parenting or making an art piece or writing a song. So it requires presence. This fifth house is fascinating. It's your creative Dharma. What will you create in your life? And if we just think, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that, I'm going to plan it all out, and it's going to be flawless, we're going to meet with great frustration. So it requires letting go of your future imaginative visions of how you want it to look. And also letting go of your past memories of how things have already looked in your life. For instance, if you've failed as a father many times at holding your temper and yelled at your children, you might feel unworthy in this moment to be a good daddy. But if you let go of what's called Rahu and Ketu, which are the past and future elements in your mind barking at you, and just be present and do your best here and now, then that fifth house, the creative Dharma, can unfold. And this goes for whether we're counseling, creating, fathering, or mothering, doing anything that requires tact from the higher mind. We want to enter presence. This is why meditators meditate. It's to enter presence. I know many of us just sit and think, and we play with Rahu and Ketu and see the mind almost as like a movie we're watching, and we're just entertaining ourselves by thinking and thinking and thinking. That's one way you can practice meditation, but it's not what the yogis define as meditation, which is those moments, and they can be just barely moments sometimes, where you're very present and completely stilled the mind chatter. This is the presence of God, and it requires what I mentioned in the beginning, all surrendering love. You have to be willing to let go of your mental movie that you've so entertained by up there, and instead enter the present moment with a sense of surrender. Surrender of what? The tendency to need to follow your thoughts and to recognize that these thoughts have led me nowhere. They just bring me around in circles again and again, back into most of the time, frustration with why I can't manifest them, why I can't manifest the things I hope my future holds with my imagination. So coming back to how to get intuition to flow, we must enter presence. And this will make you a very good parent when you learn how to be present with your child, to sense their reality, to allow them to be the leader sometimes, and to detach entirely from your own program of what you would like to control about it all. And that makes you very intuitive, just to be, and that makes a very good counselor, and an astrologer as well needs that quality. Because if they're sitting with a person's chart, trying to plan out everything they're going to say, and they don't really know the person yet, they might go right over their head, or they might say things that are not helpful to them. So it requires a lot of sensing of where the person is at. And that's through our presence that we can do that. And if we don't know where to start, we can pray for it. We can say, Divine Mother or Heavenly Father, help me to be present. Help me to let go of what I think I know and to be here and now with the person and to listen to them. And so all these things lead to intuitive growth and the discriminative mind unfolding. And coming back to the idea of creativity, if you want to write a song or write a journal entry or write a blog or an essay or a book, it will require you learning this. Otherwise, you're going to have your own mental games sabotage you. How do we learn how to stay present for longer and longer periods? And that will lead to great creative works for that person. But most of the time we get one creative insight and then think, oh, this is brilliant. I'm in control. So now where do I want it to go next? And that will block us. So again, letting go and letting spirit be the guide is the key to our creative Dharma. And that includes all things like parenting, artistic endeavors, counseling, and anything really that brings you into present mind. And then the sixth house, we can finish with that today. It's the next Artha house. And the sixth house is considered to be a place of self-improvement, where we learn to serve. We learn to be a karma yogi. And we learn also about healing. Sometimes we think, let's say, service is just us being used. But when we learn to enjoy giving, then we can heal from whatever delusions we've held in other lifetimes that have held us back from giving ourselves as a karma yogi, as an instrument of God to the world. Most of the healers that I have known in this life have been wounded deeply in the beginning of life. And they have healed whatever wound, psychological, emotional, or physical, that was given to them. And thus they understand more about how to serve as a healer. And not all sixth house people have a sense of needing to heal others. They may still be working on healing themselves. This is one place that you see a lot of differences in people when they have strong sixth house planets. You can never really tell whether they're just going to be a really hard worker or whether they're going to be a healer. And it will have to do with how much of their own wound they have healed and how much they have served and purified themselves of self-will and the need to hold on to their trauma or see the world as that they've been victimized by something. So sixth house people have a lot of healing to do, and that will make them healers. This is one of the ways we heal, such as, like, for instance, in Alcoholics Anonymous, the best healers in that service are those who've been alcoholics. They've healed. And the best kind of physical therapists are those who have had injuries and healed those injuries. And the best kind of dietary practitioners are those who've had real gut issues and have learned a lot about herbology or how to heal that. So these two things at first, healing and service, don't seem to fit harmoniously together. It's a question mark about those. But having done a lot of thought and prayer about these, I can feel like I've learned how they do go together. And if you want to know how to heal, go and serve. That's how you put your energy to good use and put yourself in a higher state that will begin to heal from whatever it is, the burden of wound that you're holding on to, whether it's emotional or physical. If we go and find a way to serve, we will begin to heal. So how is this an Artha house? Well, the sixth house is often thought of as the person who is working. And so it's definitely going to bring you a wealth of some sort. But let's call it, not in this case so much money, because not all sixth house people are rich. But if you spend your life in giving, you will heal. And this form of Artha is the form of needing wellness. So that's why they call it the house of health. I need healing. That's what I want. That's what I need. Artha is like a form of need. I'm going after my needs. And in this case, I need healing. So finding a meaningful place to serve would be the first step for that person. And just to finish, if the sixth house Lord were in the ninth house, that wouldn't be someone who is probably going to serve as a minister in their life of something. If it's in the eighth house, that person's really got a lot of people to help who struggle. They may be a helper of people who have been through really hard times. If it's the sixth Lord and seventh, so you see, wherever the sixth Lord is, it will show us where we might want to serve, where we will experience healing by serving. So those are our first six houses. And
thanks
I'll
so
let
much.
you go ahead and...
The fact that it's an upachaya house, which means a house that's growing, that grows with time and that gets better with time. It's almost like you have to go through the fire early in life and deal with the challenges and the conflicts of the sixth house. And then if you know, hopefully you can overcome those challenges and then eventually turn it into healing of yourself, and even better, using the healing that you've done on yourself, that you've received, to help other people to heal. And I loved what the example that you used of like Alcoholics Anonymous. That's like a perfect example of having that terrible thing happen to you and to go through a real torturous experience and then being able to use that to help other people overcome that is powerful.
Yes, totally. And yes, that's a great point. Just that the wound that's being given to you, it will be humiliating in your life, but it will bring you to a point where you know you need to improve. Not everyone knows that. You know, it's like, oh, I'm good enough how I am. But the sixth house has a way of revealing to you what you said, upachaya, your need for self-improvement. And therefore, it's a very progressive house. People work through a lot of karma through serving and through healing and through combining the two and not seeing them as separate.
Kalidas, thank you so much. It's been amazing. And I when you talk, I can just kind of go into a bit of a trance. I can listen to you talk for such a long time. You just speak with such clarity, and it's so good for me as well. I learn so much when you share. So yeah, it's been amazing, and I hope that at some point we can meet again and chat about houses 7 to 12.
Absolutely. And it's been a great pleasure to be part of your podcast here. And thank you for the invite. I'm always happy to share and would love to do the last 6 houses another time, brother.
Okay, thank you so much.
Okay. Have a lovely one.